And you're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Coming up, what is the full impact of U.S. foreign policy on Afghanistan in the past 2 decades? And American scholar Jeffrey Sachs shares his views after this.
The United States spent almost all of that $1 trillion on military approaches. What did the U.S. leave behind?
Welcome back. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. As many countries keep a close watch on the fast-changing situation in Afghanistan, the United Nations held an Emergency Security Council meeting. The UN Secretary General called for efforts to prevent the country from again becoming a safe haven for terrorists. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said China has encouraged the Taliban to pursue a moderate religious policy and hopes that the new Afghan regime can make a clean break from terror-linked forces. U.S. President Joe Biden on Monday stood by his decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, saying foreign forces could not defend a nation whose leaders gave up and fled. Meanwhile, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang exchanged views with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken over the phone on the Afghan situation earlier in the week. Wang reiterated China's stance that the facts have once again proven that mechanically copying a foreign model cannot be fit for a country with a completely different history, culture, and national conditions. Mr. Blinken, talking about the U.S. side, did thank China for participating in the Doha talks with the Taliban. Both sides agreed to go on with close consultations. So how did the situation in Afghanistan rapidly evolving and devolve into what it is today? What is the full impact of U.S. policy and action in Afghanistan in the past 2 decades? On that, I talked to Jeffrey Sachs, professor and director of the Center for Sustainable Development from Columbia University. He is a straight talker.
There's a tragedy underway because of so much chaos. But we should understand that Afghanistan has been in a tragedy for 40 years. And unfortunately, the United States caused a lot of that. It was back in 1979 that the U.S. began covert operations to support radical jihadists, the Mujahideen, to fight a Soviet-backed regime. That provoked the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. That provoked 40 years of war and violence. The United States intervened again with a massive invasion in 2001. And frankly, no good has come out of this. No economic development, no progress, and the United States spent $1 trillion between 2001 and now for nothing. No benefit to the people of Afghanistan. It's been horrible. It proves war is useless in these circumstances. And covert operations are horrible. And unfortunately, the last few days has just been the end of a long, long U.S. foreign policy disaster, I'm afraid, that has really punished the Afghan people.
Many wondered why the Biden administration did not inherit much from the Trump administration, except this very crucial issue.
Well, I think the amazing point is if you spend $1 trillion in another country, you expect something good to come out of that. Some infrastructure, some development, some support of the population for the changes. But the United States spent almost all of that $1 trillion on military approaches. What did the U.S. leave behind in Afghanistan? Where are the hospitals? Where are the schools? Where are the roads? Where is the safe childbirth? Unfortunately, this is why there was no support for the U.S.-backed government, because the U.S. effort was a military effort. And unfortunately, a military effort is not a developmental effort. A military effort doesn't win the support of people. ended up having no broad support in the population. And the result is the Taliban were able to wait and then return after $1 trillion. So, of course, I look at this from an American point of view, and I say how stupid that policy was, not just for 20 years, but for 40 years. So Biden, he inherited the end of a willfully stupid policy. This administration did not do a good job in the last few days, that's for sure. But this is the end of a long, long failed story.
But this might be a dark point on the record of this administration for a long time to come. And everybody has been hearing over the past few days, I'm sure, to come, about how dramatic life change it has been over just the past few weeks with the U.S. chaotic exit.
Well, this is something almost exactly like the end of the Vietnam War, with the helicopters on the roof of the embassy in Saigon, chaos, failure after spending a fortune. To me, it's not a surprise. I'm old enough to have lived through many such foreign policy disasters. This one is not unique. The United States made an utter mess in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. The United States made a mess in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan. So I have to say, I don't mean to be cynical, I just mean to be descriptive. I'm not shocked by this.
But why? One after another. Why, Professor?
There's an old expression in English that when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, the United States has a powerful military, so everything looks like a solution for a war. And so the United States uses the military as foreign policy. But there is no foreign policy that comes out of a military. And we use the military in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Syria. We use the military in this region in Central Asia. We use the military in Central America. We use the military in Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Not once did this work. So I can tell you back in 2001, I thought this was going to be a debacle. And then in 2002 and 2003, because these are problems of development, for example. Afghanistan is a poor country. It lacks infrastructure. It has horrendously high maternal mortality rates and child death rates and illiteracy. Those are problems that an army can never solve and can never stabilize. Those are problems that require investment. That's the only way to approach challenges like this. But if you ask the American leadership, they'd say, we're never going to waste our money on, building schools and hospitals in Afghanistan. That's ridiculous. Why should we waste our money? But then they waste $1 trillion on the military approach, which is doomed to fail. So this is a tragedy that we've seen many, many times before. The U.S. needs a new foreign policy. I wrote a book with that title in 2019. It said we need cooperation, we need peace, we need development, we need an approach that works with other countries, because surely the United States should have been working with China, with Russia, and with the political forces in Afghanistan for the last 20 years in order to help development. China has built a rail that connects Afghanistan. That's for development. That's for a future. And this is the kind of process to really create stability in an unstable region, and where a region is unstable because it's landlocked, trapped in poverty, without education, without an economic prospect. It has been growing heroin as a result, and poppies for decades, because there's no normal development. Yet it's a country that's rich in resources, and with proper development could make progress.
Right.
And that's what the U.S. should have focused on.
But Professor Sachs, you're so politically incorrect, I have to say, in the eyes of many, probably in your country right now. How could you dare to say all these things?
Well, because, you know, at my age, and I've been at this for 41 years working all over the world, I've seen straight up Vietnam. As I said, the disaster in Cambodia. I've seen the U.S. intervention in Central America. We've seen 2 Gulf wars. We've seen what covert operations did to destroy Syria. It's enough. I'm so sad for my country.
But there must be a logic. I mean, if all these things happen once and again, there must be a logic. You talk about the military, and you talk about the U.S. look at things with the so-called from the position of strength, as many would love to say this phrase once and again. So what is driving this? What is driving all these perceptions?
I don't think it's interest, though. Of course, there are interests. There are corrupt contractors. There's the military-industrial complex. But I actually don't think that it's that. First, I think it's a lot of ignorance in the United States. The U.S. does not know the history and geography of the rest of the world, period. I mean, period. And second, there is, not in all parts of American society, but in certain parts of American society, a deep disdain for other cultures. And the result of that is you don't have the ethics or the knowledge to succeed, but you do have a powerful hammer, as I said. And so I think that these are not interests. Nobody won in the U.S. out of Afghanistan. This has just been a tragedy, but so stupid. And that is because of ignorance and because the American leaders never cared really about Afghanistan, and the public never cared about Afghanistan. And a good principle is if you don't care, you shouldn't spend $1 trillion. And if you are going to spend $1 trillion, you better care about the people that are involved here, because if it's only for you, not for the people involved, it's never going to succeed.
Right. What has been this relationship that the U.S. has with the Taliban? The Taliban was pretty much condemned by the United States, at least by politicians. You see that also in the U.S. press. And yet, at the end of the day, the U.S. is having an agreement with the Taliban and with the Taliban alone, without really counting in even the Afghan government, which the U.S. has been supporting. So to me, it's a very interesting, huge 180-degree turn from one extreme to another extreme. What happened, Professor?
If you look at a map, the whole idea that the United States is somehow controlling the fate of Afghanistan is absurd. The map of the world or the globe should tell us what the heck is going on to begin with, that the United States is in a 20-year war in Central Asia in this way. And not one person in America in a million could name 3 cities in Afghanistan. You know, it's just unbelievable that we're there ignorantly. So don't look for deep consistencies. The reason they were discussing with the Taliban recently is to get out. Okay, getting out is the right thing to do. Getting out chaotically is sad. Having been in for 42 years, because I'm putting the date not to 2001, but to 1979.
Right.
The United States should have learned something. And frankly, the truth is solutions are going to come either from within Afghanistan and more from neighbors. The United States could not run a railroad from New York to Kabul or to Afghanistan, but China can. It's in China's neighborhood, Russia, and of course, Iran and other countries that should help after 40 years of war in this neighboring country.
But you know, Professor,
now
the United States now
bereft of,
is not having good relations with almost every one of the names that you just mentioned. How could you expect them to cooperate closely?
Well, this is what happens when you have a foreign policy that is based on not the idea of cooperation and problem solving, but based on the idea of primacy. Since the United States wants to be number one, it doesn't want to have cooperation with the other countries. It sees them as a threat. And that is fundamentally why these problems don't get solved, because the United States could not and should not run Afghanistan, and it could never have been engaged successfully without understanding and cooperation and brainstorming and problem solving and investment, especially by neighbors. But like you say, the United States doesn't seek good relations with those countries, and the result is a complete debacle. $1 trillion, an abrupt, chaotic exit. But that's the logical outcome, the predictable outcome of a situation in which the U.S. in a fantasy thinks that it can remake another society by a military occupation.
How much takeaway or the right takeaway do you think people will be able to get?
The U.S. is a very divided society. Some people look at this and say, what were we doing? What were we thinking? And those are the same people, by the way, or the children of the people who 50 years ago were saying, what are we doing in Vietnam, for heaven's sake? So we've been there before. I've been there, you know, at an individual level, seeing this debate. But there's another side of America which will say immediately, the Trump side will say, even though Trump, he was the one that ordered the exit, but his kind of right-wing following will say, this is a humiliation. We need to teach them a lesson. We need more military. And so this will not solve problems in the United States. It will probably deepen divides further. We're a very divided country, and we're really right now not able to solve almost any problem, unfortunately. We can't stop COVID. We can't address these foreign policy challenges because the cultural divisions are so deep. So I'm hoping that we will learn something from this. This is the first day, and I'm hoping that something will be learned. So it's a long haul. There's no direct line from the debacle to smarter thinking, just as there wasn't after Vietnam. Vietnam taught all these lessons, but they weren't learned.
The issue of Afghanistan is only one of those things on the plate of the current administration. There's going to be midterm election coming year and presidential election. How do you think this event and others might shape the rhetorics, both inside your country and also in your foreign policies toward the others?
In truth, the most important issues for the United States are internal. We have a lot of rebuilding of our own society to do. The best part of this government is the proposal on the table right now for more than $4 trillion of spending on infrastructure. This is what the American people need. This is what the administration wants to focus on. I hope that the administration learns that it should not have an aggressive foreign policy at a time when we need internal rebuilding. It should have a cooperative foreign policy. And especially since a lot of the rebuilding that's needed is for a zero carbon economy, which is a challenge that China faces, Europe faces, we all face. We should be cooperating together, and at least the administration should see there is no benefit of an adventurous, cantankerous, aggressive foreign policy right now, not towards China, not towards anybody.
Yeah.
Because the real issues we need are to rebuild in the United States. And we should be cooperating anyway. At any time we should be cooperating, but especially now, We should tone down the rhetoric, look for help, look for cooperation, look for mutual work together, and focus our attention on what we really need to do with the United States, because not only do we need that economic and technological renovation, but that is also key for us to overcome the bitter political divides in our country.
Jeffrey Sachs, certainly a very outspoken American intellectual. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. With the chaotic exit of U.S. from Afghanistan and another crisis looming in the country, Afghan-born American author Khaled Hosseini, known for his bestseller The Kite Runner, responds to the heartbreak Afghan crisis and shares with me his thoughts on the latest developments in Afghanistan. His team sent me an email, and here is his quote. I have watched the developments of Afghanistan with great sadness. I am deeply disappointed and gravely concerned for the country. The last 20 years have been challenging, but the painstaking progress made are now threatened. The U.S. and the international community at large must take steps to prevent a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. They must exert pressure on the Taliban to respect the essential human rights of Afghans, particularly women and girls, and to refrain from using violence against Afghan citizens. With that quote, we come to the end of today's program. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching.